Well, good day to you as we begin our final lecture in the stewardship portion of our class time together. This is Bruce Barkow again from the Center for Faith and Giving, and we're going to look now at the comprehensive stewardship planning guide for congregations. Now, what we're really talking about here is a long look at stewardship over the course of a year, over the course of 2, 3, 4 years. The idea that we're integrating the teaching of stewardship into the life of our church. We're thinking about policy, we're thinking about education, we're thinking about our preaching schedule. We're thinking about more than just a 3-week period where we're going to raise next year's budget. Now, some of this lesson is going to be review for you, and some of it will be new information. So kind of take your notes and take in accordingly. I believe all the information here, though, is very important, and it really, again, starts with where we began with our first lecture of a personal inventory of your own leadership. When you're thinking about the long-term work in your congregation, you're really thinking about how do I, as a leader, model what it is that I want to teach? And how does my staff model what I want to teach, what we want to teach as a church? How do our elders model what we want the congregation to begin to comprehend and learn and practice? How does the board participate in this? So it really begins with you, and then the encouragement of your staff and your board and your elders to do a personal giving inventory, to go ahead and calculate the real percentage of your charitable giving, because we tend to think of ourselves as more generous than in reality we are. That's a North American reality. When we check what do we think we give away versus what our tax forms actually show that we give away. So it's important to take that 1040 long form, look at that bottom of the first page, or turn it over to the top of the second where you're carrying over your adjusted gross income, and then go to your Schedule A and look at your charitable deductions, and you simply divide one into the other and you'll get a real percentage of where you are. We think about, how we're going to do this long term. We want to encourage our elders to do this, our staff to do this, our board to do this. They don't need to share this information with anyone. This is for their own point of reference, so they see where it is that they need to be and how it is that they need to be growing. I want to refer you to a very important piece of information that you should have a copy of this, and you should make sure that your treasurer and your financial secretaries have copies of this. It's downloadable at this website. It is a review of all the policy that relates to finance. It's called the Church Treasurer's Handbook. This is an invaluable guide, and it will cover many of the questions that I'm going to raise for you now, though not all of them. But this is a tremendous resource that's available in PDF form. It's about 80 pages, so when you go to print it, don't be surprised. But it has been reworked in the last couple of years, and I strongly think that you ought to have one of these. You ought to know what's in it. Your treasurer and your financial secretary ought to have these. Your finance chair ought to have a copy of the Treasurer's Handbook and ought to be prepared to help guide the process for the whole church. You need to look at all the policies you currently have in place for how you deal with money. What's really written down in your Constitution, in your bylaws? What is actually there, so that then as you begin to do this review, you know, well, we're deficient here, or we're really in good shape here. Now here's the beginning of the questions that you need to be asking, that your church needs to be asking. Your finance team should sit down with these questions and be able to answer all of these. Who's authorized to count the money and record the amounts? How do we choose this person? In most congregations, that's an elected person. It is often one, sometimes two. We call them financial secretaries in our disciple tradition a lot. And they handle the income side of the ledger. But does your church have a formal way in which to do that, or do we just ask Aunt Bertha to do it because she's been doing it forever and her daddy did it before her? How those people are chosen is a part of that foundational piece of trust, right? Can anybody have access to this information, or is it a limited pool? And what do they do with the information they have? Now, Christopher's book, remember, suggests that giving pattern changes should be reported to the pastor, and perhaps the chair of the elders or the chair of the finance committee. But certainly the pastor ought to have some knowledge. And in terms of the specifics about how much and how often and what kind of gift is made, who has access to that information? And is it written down, or is it just our quote-unquote policy? Well, nobody knows except the financial secretary. But that's not written down anywhere. In most churches, that's what's understood to be the policy, when instead it is only the practice. There's nothing written down about it. Who is authorized to write checks or draw funds? Again, usually this is an elected position. Should be. The congregation should have a voice and say in who it is that we ask to do this. In many congregations of any size, over 100 members in worship, they're generally a paid person, because any congregation of any size, particularly one that has at least one full-time staff member and a part-time organist, part-time secretary, part-time custodian, there's a lot of work to be done for the treasurer. The treasurer, in the old days of doing everything by writing checks, might write as many as 75 checks in a month in a small congregation to all of the Sunday school curriculum, the light bill, the gas bill, the sewer bill, the water bill, writing postage, paying the salaries, paying the pension, all. So it's a big job, and we need to remember that. We're asking folks to do a lot. But who do we authorize to do that? How many people? How do we choose those folks? And are there limits to the amounts that can be drawn? In other words, does a check, any check over $500 except payroll, require 2 signatures? Is that policy? Is there an actual line on the check for a second signature? Is it printed on there? Is it $1,000? Is it $5,000? What is there a limit? So somebody can't just on a whim clean out your checking account, or your savings account, or your trust fund. How are those managed, and is there a policy for that? Your insurance company ought to have some prescriptions for you that will make a determination whether or not they will cover you against a loss through embezzlement or malfeasance. And you need to be aware of that. And if you don't have that kind of insurance, you'll see later on that's pretty important. Should payments be authorized by a line equivalent in the budget? In other words, I'm paying for toilet paper, and that's in a line item in the budget, not necessarily toilet paper, but janitorial supplies, so that we know how things match up. Somebody wants to buy 100 gallons of bubble soap so we can blow bubbles in the neighborhood. Is that in keeping with us, or is that something special? And because of an amount, does it require some kind of special action? Are all requests for payments documented with appropriate receipts? The answer to that question ought to be they better be. They should be. Is anyone ever paid in cash? Best not to be paid in cash. If they are paid in cash, they should be required to sign a receipt that says that in fact they have been paid, and that receipt is kept so no one can forget that they were paid. It happens. We get busy. We still, for some reason, have the receipt, or in our mind have the memory that, the church owes me for. If you pay anybody in cash, I don't care how much it's for, then there ought to be a receipt. But better still to not pay anyone in cash. Who and how often reports financial activity, and who reviews and receives those reports? In most congregations, there's a monthly board meeting, and there's a financial report submitted by both the financial secretary and the treasurer if they are 2 separate offices, and the income is reported and the expenses are reported, and a balance is given. This is important in that piece of how do we build trust. Are we transparent? Can people read and understand the reports? Are they available to everyone who is giving us funding? This is very important in trust building within our constituency. Um, and because of the nature of the kind of organization we are, that ought to be available to everyone. Who are we? When I give money in the offering plate, where does it go? You can find out where every dollar of your mission dollars goes, down to the 10-cent level, through Disciple Mission Fund. When you give to DMF, you can get an annual report that will show all of the previous year's gifts, and based on the percentage formula of how DMF distributes money, you can find out you gave 42 cents to the Council on Christian Unity, and $10 to home missions. Let's of course hope the numbers are bigger than that, but I mean it will show you that breakdown based on a percentage of how the money is distributed. Who's reviewing those reports? Are we just approving them because they come to us in a minute package, of the previous meeting, and we just approve them blindly and go on? Well, first of all, by Robert's Rules of Order, we should not be approving them. We should be receiving them. To approve them means we're certifying that they are accurate. And if somebody is doing something dishonest with the money and it hasn't been caught yet, here we have a record of having approved all of these reports. So language, again, plays a role and is important to us in the business of how we do church. And even churches that work by consensus, you receive a financial report, you approve minutes, and that subtlety is important. But is somebody really looking at them and doing the math, or do we just blindly take them in? My suggestion is to you, you ought to have a couple people on your board who are number savvy, who spend some time with these reports every month and check back with you if you're not number savvy. Yeah, they look to be in order. That will catch a problem much sooner than waiting for an audit. And some churches never audit and never realize that money is not going where we think it is. Who builds the budget? In many of our churches, the finance team sits down, and based on an estimate of giving for the coming year and pledges received for the coming year, we build a budget in the back room, with none of our program people participating. And in some of our churches, that structure is, the finance team usually consists of the treasurer and assistant treasurer, financial secretary and assistant financial secretary, the chair of the finance committee, and maybe, if you're lucky, the minister ex officio. I think a budget is much more effectively built as a team process where your program people participate in that, and they don't simply submit requests. But there's a meeting together once they have prepared what their portion of the budget's going to be, where they listen to each other talk about what it is they're going to do with that money. Well, we had $500 in there last year, so let's keep it the same. Well, that's not a good reason. What are we going to really do with it, and how does it fit with our vision? Remember, going back to our other lectures, and we'll come up around this again as kind of a summary piece, that everything we do is coordinated with our vision and our mission. And if it doesn't fit that, then we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? So when we look at who's building the budget, how do those people get to the table? Are they elected? Are they appointed? Is it a combination of both? This is all a part of that trust piece. And this is why I think it's important that your program people and your personnel team are involved in the building of the budget, because they're stakeholders in the outcome.